So afternoon, everyone. Introduction from my side. My name's Simon McDonald. I run our APJ business for Optimizely. I'll let the guys do their intro in a second. A couple of things. On the Slido questions, if you guys have got questions, get them into Slido as soon as you can. I might abruptly stop our conversation if the questions get really interesting, so stick them in there early. I also have a fascinating book. It is actually a great read. It's Stephen Tomke is a Harvard professor specializing in experimentation. So for the questions that get answered at the end, there'll be a free copy of the book. So make sure you get into Slido because you've got to be in it to win it. So to kick things off, Jess, why don't you introduce yourself?
So I'm Jess. Currently, I'm at Drumline Digital and Experimentation Agency. I've been there for the last 2 years, but before that, I was at NIB building up their experimentation and personalization practices there. And yeah, I've been in experimentation a while. I remember dabbling in the OG Optimizely in 2012, so it's been a journey, but yeah, a good one.
And Rikard?
Yeah, so my name is Rikard. I look after digital labs at TPG Telecom. We're all about making data and insights more accessible, as well as embedding experimentation practices into the ways of working. Yeah, essentially what we're trying to do is to shape better customer experiences and drive business growth.
Yeah, so obviously when you start prepping for these panels, you spend some time getting to know the guys. So spending time with Rikard and understanding what he's doing with the experimentation as a practice within TPG has been really interesting, and we'll share some of that with you guys today. But I guess when I started at Optimizely about 6 years ago, I didn't really understand anything about experimentation. So I went to my first meeting that Jess was hosting in Newcastle with about 20-odd executives. And I was like, okay, we'll see how this goes. But throughout that meeting, I saw every executive in that room hanging on every word that Jess would say about experimentation and the impact that it would have on their part of the business. So grateful to Jess for kicking off my passion in the space, but that really stood out as an example of where we see experimentation now in terms of being a core 101 business practice. So if you guys are not doing it, you should definitely be thinking about doing it. And on that, just a show of hands, in the room, who's currently running an experimentation program? Okay, yeah. So kind of around half. So I think it would be interesting for you guys after this to definitely grab the guys, chat to the Optimizely team, but we really want you guys to understand where experimentation fits in. It's not just CRO, which we'll talk about during this session as well. So, Rikard, maybe just start in terms of experimentation as a practice. How is it actually viewed by TPG and the executive team and the wider organization?
Yeah, so it's really positive, and there's really good momentum behind it. So we started with a centralized function. This was a core team that did an awesome job at just demonstrating the value of experimentation and getting the organization excited about it. For us to be able to scale, we had to shift to a hybrid model where we empower the different squads to run their own experimentation programs, but then we have the backing of a centralized function that it's setting out the standards, is providing the training, and it's also playing a governance role. And essentially what we're trying to do is to make experimentation just part of the ways of working. And we want to empower the different teams to run their programs, but we also want the different subject matter experts to have that as part of their toolkit. So from your designers to your content writers and so on. So that's really what we're looking to achieve with our experimentation program.
So and there's a level of autonomy now that you're giving to people in the organization to think about making decisions that are data-led, right?
Yeah, that's right. And this becomes another data point for those teams to leverage. And what we're trying to do is to also get other parts of the organization to make use of the experimentation practice to inform their decisions. Just another insight that they can use to inform their programs or their decision making.
Okay, so it sounds like you've got a supportive top-down, bottom-up approach to experimentation. Like, Jess, you're probably now working with a number of different organizations. Like, what's the general sense moving into the end of 2024 where experimentation sits?
Yeah, I think the value of experimentation is generally seen within organizations, but there can be some friction around it not being as transparent as it could be, and sometimes looking like rebels behind closed doors trying to make things happen. So I think, often organizations are trying to figure out how do we understand more or showcase more and get more people engaged in experimentation. And what I've seen is, it usually has started out with that central kind of space, and how we move into that scaled approach that you were talking about, Rikard, around how do we get more teams embracing and engaging and moving to that kind of more distributed experimentation model. It seems to be a common theme across a lot of organizations, how they kind of get the broader business engaged and understanding how experimentation could be a part of the work that they do, not just an additional thing that they need to focus on.
Yeah. And I think what's really interesting, like as digital e-commerce marketing professionals, like we should all be looking for opportunities about like how we can impact the wider business. So like, I guess this is often pigeonholed into conversion rate optimization as a practice, which is very marketing product driven. But as we move forward as an organization that needs to make decisions on data, Rikard, you shared a pretty cool example of how you'd worked with a team outside of those typical stakeholders to help them almost build a business case. Do you want to share that with us?
Yeah, sure. So I'll start with saying that the typical stakeholders are, your brand teams and marketing and so on, and it's mainly around messaging and positioning and so on. But the one that we were talking about was outside of that, and that's with our customer care team, and more specifically those on web chat. So we're running an experiment to determine if having live chat in a specific touch point of our upgrades journey is one, something that our customers value, something that is useful, and two, that it makes business sense, and more around FTEs. And with these things, it can be a little bit tricky because you have to think about resourcing, you have to think about training. So when we run our experiment, we do it with a much smaller portion of our traffic, so we can still manage those live chat queues, if you will. So we're using experimentation in this case to validate some of the business assumptions that we've made. And this is mainly around whether this is something that our customers really want. Is it worth doing? So there's an element of de-risking. But also, it's going to give us a much clearer understanding of the level of FTE that we're going to need. So when we go into our business case stage, we can have a much more informed view of it.
Yeah, so it's a very simple use case, but I think it's a really powerful one where it only gives us, as marketers or digital specialists, to lean out to other groups to help them make decisions. Everything impacts the digital customer experience. So yeah, I love that example. And I think, Jess, even during your time at NIB, there was examples of working with the contact center team as well, right?
Yeah, so as we all know, the contact center is quite a complex area to make change. There's a lot of training that goes involved to the agents, and while there might be customer research and business initiatives that inform, ideas that you might want to explore, it can be hard to say, all right, let's invest in training up 100 staff members to speak this way to our customers. So at NIB and also with P&O, we managed to do a couple of tests within the contact centres where we were able to ring fence some groups of people to have control, where they're talking about, how we normally would sell in products and services, and then have a variation of a group of agents that are there going and talking about our services and products in a different way. And this might be around different layers that they're in the purchase journey. So we might have kind of some some identification kind of elements of that to say, all right, well, you're at this stage, let's talk to you a certain way. Similarly around demographics, around like, you know, your singles versus families, self-insurance, like, is there different ways that we want to sell in and different products that we want to sell them in? So that was a really exciting thing, and it always is very exciting to move beyond just the digital space and understand how experimentation can help inform those kind of things. So like you said, the FTE, but also around the training that you want to bring to the staff and the agents and understand, well, it's worthwhile doing it because we've seen this impact within the controlled experiment that we've run.
Yeah, love it. So again, I think the general message is, guys, if you are running a program and are looking at ways to have an impact outside of just what your specific role or specific team is, like, go and talk to people, understand what some of their challenges might be, and think about how you can potentially partner with them to deliver data that might help them get an outcome. Like getting an FTE budget approved through a CRO platform is not typically what we used to think about, but it's absolutely a use case that you guys should be thinking about in terms of partnering with the wider organization. I'm going to skip on to AI because this is the thing that everyone talks about in 2024, but I think it's important in terms of what we're talking about today from an experimentation standpoint to just make sure that everyone's on the same page. So, like, just from our viewpoint at TPG as an organization, Rikard, like, where do they sit on AI? Like, what's the general attitude towards it?
Yeah, so we have some strong guardrails in place, particularly around privacy and security. So you can say that we're somehow conservative in our approach, but we do make a lot of progress on that front, and we start small. So I think the way to look at it is that we have essentially three streams. So the first one is those who are naturally curious about the technology. So, and you'd be surprised, you have people from UXers that are using large language models to analyze user feedback, all dummy data, by the way, to predictive analytics for our analysts. Then we have the second type of activity is more around the tools that we already have, and that could be from Atlassian all the way to Figma, where a lot of AI tools are being incorporated into these platforms. So we're experimenting with that, seeing how effective it is, if it can sort of streamline some of our workflows and so on. And then we have a third stream, which is structured in a way that you have people dedicated to it, where they're exploring different use cases and then validating whether those use cases add up. And, you know, that could be anything that goes from our ways of working to how we shape experiences for our customers. And then we have a whole transformation side of things, which is looking at, you know, real-time decisioning engines and so on. So there's really a few activities around that, but we've taken an approach that, hey, we need to put the right guardrails in place to make sure that we're doing the right thing.
But I suppose there's a level of like controlled autonomy that you guys have got within the digital consumer team to think about how AI is going to benefit the consumer, right?
Yeah, definitely. And there's an awful lot of conversations around it. And yeah, definitely a lot of validation, but also trying not to get too stuck on what's that big vision, but also just more around, let's just get started. Let's start experimenting with it and see where it takes us.
Sure. And then just, I guess from your perspective, like, again, you're dealing with a number of different organizations, like, we've probably been using AI and ML, all the rest of it, for quite some time now. I mean, what's the general consensus across the organizations you're talking to?
Yeah, like you said, AI has been around for a long time. We've been using it in varying levels of machine learning and figuring out who we should be talking to and when, and getting some scoring and things like that, as well as, you know, the multi-arm bandits and stats accelerator that have been here for quite some time, and it's making me feel really old knowing that I was there for their birth. But you know, it still feels like there's a hesitancy out there, and myself included until recently, as AI starts giving us ideas around the content and the decisions that we should be making, instead of just like ramping up our analytics capability. So it's kind of been a really interesting journey from that, just seeing how we're kind of not sure how it fits in for us, but I really see that, in 2025, things are really going to ramp up in this space as we see it as a velocity increaser. It allows us to get more learnings happening and learning more quickly because we're relying on some of these tools to really pump up our experiment programs. So helping organizations adopt experimentation quicker and being able to see what it can do. So I think there is a lot of opportunity ahead of us in the AI space, as long as we don't get too scared of, what it could be if things go wrong. So,
but I think if everyone's clear on the mundane part of life that AI can take out for us all, and that we can all dive more into the more complex, exciting part of experimentation as a practice.
Yeah.
I think that's part of what we need to be doing to help show that, right?
Yeah, and helping different teams see how they could get involved in experimentation. Like, there's probably a lot of people who are doing experiments without calling it experimentation. Similarly, there's probably a heap of people using AI that aren't really thinking about it in that way. So I feel like there's a really good opportunity to understand, how this can help me get more involved and have more learnings in the work that I do every day.
Yeah, I mean, we've got customers that we've put generative AI capability into the platform, and some people are just not using it because they're not used to it, and they're, I guess, looking at it going, well, if I'm not seen to be doing this, then what's my role? Whereas they should be looking at it going, I can now take down the time I'm spending on this task using the generative AI to look at the different variations I'm going to get. What else can I be doing on top of that? And I really want to start seeing that proactive attitude coming on from more of the customers and organizations that we deal with. I guess from an AI lens in experimentation for you guys, Rikard, your name is just so much cooler than mine, by the way. Simon.
Thank you.
Shit, Rikard's nice. What would be an example of how you guys are using AI within your experimentation program?
Yeah, so we got Black Friday just around the corner. That's a big sales event for us. So instead of running with one message, what we're planning to do is to launch with a series of variants, and then use Optimizely's multi-arm bandit testing to dynamically assign traffic based on real-time performance. And as you know, that basically makes use of machine learning.
Yep.
So it's not something that is necessarily new. It's certainly more advanced now. I think that for Optimizely, it's been around for a little while, for those of you playing trivia. But that's a really practical use case for us, and a good use of AI.
But it's funny, if you go back to your original statement about TPG, the conservative approach, but you're suddenly using AI and machine learning in the biggest or second biggest sales day of the year because you've just done it before. It'd be interesting just to see what they would have thought if you just brought this capability to the table and called it AI. Would they allow it to you to use it in that fashion? I don't think they would.
It depends on the audience. Some would be quite impressed and go, "Oh yeah, that sounds pretty official. We should do it." But yeah, but more often than not, people are nervous about it.
Yeah.
Are you sure that's going to work? Are we going to break anything? Maybe.
I'm going to stop our rest of our questions because we've got quite a few good questions coming in, and I know everyone's desperate to get a copy of this book. So so Jess, this might be quite a good one for you from NIB days. So Christine, you put your hand up. Okay, first book goes to Christine. We work in financial services in a highly regulated industry with a low risk appetite. How do you get stakeholder buy-in, especially from legal and compliance? You've got 90 seconds to answer that question.
So legal and compliance, there is a big risk factor. So I have one use case that we had around our lead capture that we had back in the day at NIB. And so one of the things that we had legal saying, you need to put this information on this field, and we ran a test to see the impact of putting that information on a field, and saw that it was something like reduced $12 million on revenue by having that information on a field. And so bringing that to our exec team to say, okay, by putting that in place, we will be reducing our revenue by $12 million. Are you happy with that? It becomes a conversation about that risk factor. So how risky is it having that information versus not having it? Than, the cost benefit that we had. So we used experimentation a bit to kind of be able to push our conservativeness around. I'm trying to think, I got to sound out a word, guys. But yeah, so, how conservative we were going to be from a risk and compliance factor, knowing that the benefit was actually quite large in having that information on a lead form, or not having that information on a lead form. So there's things like that we've utilised around that to tell that story and then help them understand the decisions that they're making have an impact as well, and being able to see that, I think, is really important as you try to grow that out through the business.
Yeah, and just get them involved as early as possible. So legal and compliance become your best friend, because if they say no, then...
That's right. They've got to be on the journey the whole way. Like all of the experiments that you're doing, you want to be kind of running past and getting ideas. So yeah, we might not want to do that kind of really out there version of this. We might need to include something else, and having them on that journey to be part of those ideas and finessing the experiments can also be really helpful.
All right, Rikard, I think this is a good question for you. So how does experimentation differ with other initiatives like voice of customer or UX research?
Yeah, really good question. So historically, it's been in some ways isolated. It's been a siloed sort of position. And what we're trying to do now is to bring all of those together and really complete that story. So, I mentioned the multi-arm bandit test for messaging. What we're trying to do is to get ahead of that by running it with existing customers or with the users before we go live. And so our UX research team come in at that front and say, here's what we found out, and here's the messages that we think resonate. And then we go live and test through the experimentation program. And so we're trying to bring those two together to really have both the qualitative and quantitative side and get a really strong understanding of completing that picture of the customer. But we also have, in certain tests, and something that we're working now is that we're also tying in terms of our customer success metric, we use CSAT scores, so customer satisfaction scores. So in everything that we do, we're trying to tie all of that together. So we can go, yep, this is the assumption, this is what we found out before we went live, this is what we found out, and here's what that looks like from a CSAT perspective. So we're trying to bring all of that together.
It's interesting as well. We see a real maturity in terms of experimentation now starting to hit Australia, where actual business metrics that an organization care about, we want to be able to experiment on those. It's we've just, a recent acquisition that you might have read about last week. We've taken on a company called NetSpring. We're now going to be looking at that exact thing, where what companies really care about and how do you experiment on that as well. So I think there's a really big evolution that we're going to see of the complexity of experiments and the data that you're able to run in those experiments happening in 2025. So I think it's built a lot of velocity in 2024. So I think that's an interesting point, Rikard. But I think the speed of complexity and maturity is going to really take a big, steep curve up to the right.
Being able to talk in the same language as the rest of the business is going to be a game changer. Like, it can be really hard to get that data generally. What I was going to add to what you were saying is really around that like validation stream of experimentation. So that user research and voice of customer have some amazing insights that you can then go and like validate at scale and understand, okay, people have said this, are they actually doing it when they get to the experience? And I think Ulf said some similar things around all of the research that they did, and then once they get live, there was some things that people weren't actually as interested in as they had said they were. And so that's what I think is a really cool or a powerful driver for experimentation, is being able to say, all right, our users have been saying this, now that we've put it into action, is this actually returning the value that we were expecting at scale?
And what, like, one of the questions we were going to go into was like, where is AI, where does it not work? And I think if you're trying to interpret UX design, qualitative research from experiments, from the data from experiments, collating all that, looking at reporting, that's probably where AI is not going to have a part. We really see in experimentation programs, because the human eye still needs to sit down and interpret all those different data sources to be able to think about what strategy looks like for next year. So I think combining the three is almost where our role starts to play into that in a bit more detail as well, right? So another question I have is, what seems to be clients' favorite thing about Optimizely? I would say Andrea and Shane in the front row there. How can organizations balance experimentation with AI at small scale while still keeping an eye on long-term goals? Big question.
Yeah, can you repeat the question?
I'm not sure we've got long enough to dive into that. It's like a whole topic of conversation.
Yeah. Come and talk to us afterwards.
Yeah.
I'd love to talk more about it.
Yeah. Okay, a simple one here, Jess. I think it's a good one. Like, we've got a small team. How do we get started? Like, what are the key things that you would just tell us to get started?
To get started with experimentation?
Yeah.
Just get started.
Exactly.
Just go.
Yeah, I think do some base level research, whether it's in your analytics or otherwise, but find some of those kind of quick wins to get started and be able to start. I guess if you don't have any experimentation tools, like that could be a problem as well. I guess depends. Come talk to me afterwards again, once of those things, because yeah, there's just like, it depends on the tools that you have. Finding some problem areas for you to focus on that will be a win from a business perspective is really important, because you can chip away at some small wins that will start getting attention. And I think no matter what you actually get started doing, you need to talk about it. You need to be telling people, building the profile around it. It's so important, and it's something that people still don't think about, because they're still thinking about the actual getting the work done part.
And our CEO talks about the hippo concept. Small ears, big mouth. Likes their opinion. Like, if you're just starting off a program, go and find whoever the hell that is.
Correct, yeah.
Challenge them on an experiment, and 9 times out of 10, it'll prove them wrong, and then you'll suddenly have their buy-in as well. So find the person that pays your salary. Don't be too abrupt to them, because that might end up in a different discussion, but challenge them for an experiment.
I don't know. I don't mind doing that.
Okay, we've got time for one more question. How important is experimentation in the early stages of web redesign? Do enough people do it? Is probably the other way to look at that. Like, what do you guys think on that?
I mean, it's a great way to validate assumptions that you've made. So you might have certain insights, and you might have some ideas on how your redesign should take shape. It's a great opportunity to go and validate some of that up front before you actually commit to it. So that's where the real value of experimentation comes in. It's more of a validation tool.
Yeah.
I think so. Like, so many times I've seen web redesigns without any exploration of how some of the things that they're trying to change will impact the user journey. And I think experimentation is really important to be able to break down, I guess, the vision and understand the importance of each of those factors on the user journey. Yeah, I think I've been through a lot of experiences where we've done the client has done a complete redesign of a checkout flow, and seen that it hasn't gone to plan because they haven't done any testing other than just getting some user feedback on the first round of designs. So yeah, I think that user research and experimentation work hand in hand as part of that initial stages of understanding, well, what are the actual problems that the user is having here? What are we trying to solve? Not just, oh, we've had this site looks the same for a long time, so we better change it. That kind of mentality kills me. Yeah, so just kind of having that experimentation and user research go into it is vital. Do it. Talk to me.
All the time. There's a big times up there, and Alice has told me to be strict on time, so we probably need to wrap it up there. There are tons of questions on here that obviously we're happy to go through. If you guys didn't get your question asked and you want to come over and have a chat. For those questions that did get asked, you see that handsome gentleman in the front row called Shane. He'll give you your new book. But appreciate you guys giving up 20 minutes or half an hour of your afternoon. Hopefully you've learned something. And thank you to Jess and Rikard for joining me this afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.